I will be reading to you a memoir I wrote that narrates my own personal Leo rising, falling, and rising again journey. For those who have Leo prominent in their charts or know someone who does, you may be able to relate. The Lion Finds His Heart. I had no idea what I was stepping into when I opened that studio door. The moment my hand touched the handle, something in me stirred, like I was about to open the portal to some pre-life soul agreement, and once I entered the room beyond, there'd be no turning back. I'd been invited by a coworker named Celeste, a beguiling woman whose eyes radiated a probing intelligence, softened by her easy breezy, no expectations smile. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that made me feel like she'd already seen my soul, and found it amusing. "It's a dance party like you've never experienced," she had promised, her eyes gleaming with a cosmic mischief I would later come to know as her default setting. I was 26, freshly returned from my year-long hallucinatory sabbatical in Cambodia, where I had gone ostensibly to teach English to fund my world traveling ambitions, but as it turned out, I had gotten distracted by the country's alluring yet seedy underbelly. I had chosen Cambodia because every government warning had screamed, "Don't go!" due mostly to the fact that Cambodia was still embroiled in a drawn-out civil war featuring one of history's most diabolical men, the Khmer Rouge dictator, Pol Pot. "Sounds like the place for me," I had reasoned. I'd gone to flirt with death, to flirt with history, to flirt with destiny, motivated by my lion heart's need for intense experiences. My head was full of Burroughs, Ginsberg, Kerouac, and Philip K. Dick. I was going to write the great American novel by getting as far away from America as possible. And I did write, but mostly checks I couldn't cash. You see, Cambodia didn't just seduce me with the ancient temples and dreamlike sunsets. It offered a smorgasbord of illicit drugs, deliciously cheap and dangerously plentiful. I fell for heroin like a moth to the flame, convinced I could ride the dragon and live to write the tale. But the only thing I brought back was 15 fewer pounds and a collection of mosquito bites turned tropical ulcers oozing pus all up and down my feet and legs. I still have those scars, which serve as the appropriate metaphor for my life. If you don't acknowledge your wounds as they happen, your wounds will give you something to remember the rest of your life. I returned to the States broken, pride bleeding, plans abandoned, a bedraggled lion crawling home to Pride Rock with its mane singed by fire. My parents had to fly me home. It was humiliating, but also, in some strange Leo way, heroic. After all, every solar god must descend before he rises again. Back in New York, I tried to rebuild. I couch surfed, I detoxed, I brooded. Then, like any good mythic figure in the second act of their journey, I went west. San Francisco, baby! Me and two buddies road-tripped across the country in a beat-up Toyota pickup with a camper shell and $1,000 of credit I hadn't yet maxed out. I was still chasing experiences, still believing I could earn my crown through art, controlled madness, and passion. But I mean, how can you control madness? We landed in a converted warehouse in the very south of Market Industrial District of the city. 6 20-somethings living together in a place we called the Green Door. No TVs allowed. We were allergic to conformity the way grunge rockers were allergic to singing clearly. We wrung every drop of anti-establishment from the soul of the 90s and lapped it up. Part beat poets, part psychonauts, part anti-capitalist Burning Men dropout. Our home was a temple to chaos and creativity. The altar, a drum circle. The sacrament, psilocybin. The prayer, dance. And then there was Celeste. We met while I was temping at some nondescript office park near the bay. Celeste radiated something I couldn't define, like moonlight speaking through a prism. I flirted, of course, but with Celeste, it felt like offering a catnip mouse to Bastet herself. She invited me to her dance party, and I, ever the Leo Ascendant, Sagittarius Moon showman, brought backup just in case the whole thing devolved into a satanic-inspired orgy. Gotta have a quick escape plan when venturing into the unknown. But what I had stepped into was pure magic. I opened the studio door and there she was. Celeste commanded the room like a sun goddess incarnate, belly dancing on stilts 5 feet above the crowd, draped in golden flowing fabrics that caught the light like liquid fire. Glittering silks draped over hidden supports, making her look like a celestial being descended from the Pleiades to bless us with hips that knew the language of the stars. The drummers were pounding the heartbeat of the cosmos. Sweat, incense, bare feet, pulse. Time had no meaning, only rhythm. And then, the moment. Celeste locked eyes with me and said, "You, sir, would you mind catching me?" The moment she fell back into my arms, trusting me completely, I glimpsed what it might be to be a true Leo rising, not the spotlight-hungry performer demanding applause, but the generous heart offering its light to others. She winked up at me from the cradle of my arms, and I was smitten, wondering briefly about the possibility of becoming someone worthy of such radiant trust. This wasn't a romantic comedy, no montage of dinners and sunsets. Celeste took me to astrology conferences. Our dates happened in lecture halls with names like Sabian symbols as destiny markers and the natal chart of Jesus Christ. I studied palmistry, astral travel, tarot. We were students of the stars, our romance was telepathic, our drugs were oracular, and I was alive again. The lion had risen. I discovered my big three: Gemini Sun, Sagittarius Moon, Leo Rising. Gemini gave me wit and wanderlust, Sagittarius gave me spiritual hunger, and Leo gave me presence. It gave me the desire to shine, to create, to be seen. I saw that Leo thread through my whole family. I saw how my father's Sagittarius-Leo-Aries combination had created a household where we all competed for our mother's Leo moon attention, with my father's Leo rising naturally claiming the stage. We were a family of fire signs, each burning with the need to be seen, to be special, to be the star of our own story. We battled for the sun itself, our mother's embrace, our father's approval, our own sense of self-worth reflected back through solar mirrors. But knowing my chart didn't heal my wounds. It helped me with self-awareness at the same time that it offered more sophisticated ways to justify my lusts. Despite all of my metaphysical knowledge, I remained emotionally immature, driven by unprocessed trauma that twisted my Leo gifts into their shadow expressions. I was still the center of my own universe, still placing my desires above everyone else's needs, still believing my intelligence and spiritual insights made me superior to those around me, though I did not overtly recognize that internal dynamic. I had knowledge which grew at an exorbitant rate, but I didn't yet cultivate the heart. And so, as surely as the sun sets, the relationship dimmed. 10 years later, I was alone, again. A father now, but not a partner. I lost myself in drink, in sex, in applause from small-town theaters and half-filled pubs. The Leo shadow is vanity, addiction to attention, and I gorged on it. I'd lived out every creative aspect of my Leo rising, performing in over 30 plays, writing, directing, teaching, but I'd done so much of it as a monument to my own brilliance and internal self-worth rather than as service to something greater. My Leo rising's need for admiration led me down darker paths. I became the charming alcoholic, the seductive performer who could light up any room but couldn't sustain genuine intimacy. I was Icarus with Leo wings, flying too close to the sun of my own ego. Inevitable crash following inevitable crash. The promiscuity, the drinking, the relentless pursuit of pleasure. These were my Leo shadow's desperate attempts to feel special, to be the star, to experience the constant validation my wounded rising sign craved. When my reputation crumbled and I retreated to a yurt in the mountains, it felt like cosmic justice. The king of his own mind dethroned, the performer without an audience, the sun eclipsed by its own shadows. Working as an indentured servant on a cannabis farm was perhaps most humbling experience of my Leo rising life. Here I was, the man who dreamed of literary greatness, literally lost in the weeds, earning barely enough to survive. Yet, this humiliation began cracking open the shell of my false self. When the calamities came, Andrea's mother's death, our house burning down, the police raid, then my own father's death, I started to sense a deeper pattern at work. The panic attacks that finally drove me from the farm were my nervous system's way of saying, enough! My Leo rising had exhausted itself trying to maintain the performance, trying to be the hero of a story that was slowly killing me. Moving back to Western New York after my father's death in 2016 felt like returning to the scene of the crime, the original family constellation where my Leo rising had learned its distorted patterns. But this time, I was ready for a different kind of education. Quitting alcohol in 2018 was my Leo rising's first genuine act of courage in decades. Not the false bravado of chasing dragons in Cambodia, but the quiet heroism of choosing life over the comfortable numbness of addiction. When I returned to spiritual studies in 2020, I brought a beginner's mind instead of the know-it-all arrogance that had characterized my earlier seeking. The move to Arkansas, surrounded by the healing energy of quartz crystals, provided the perfect laboratory for the real work. It was here that Andrea and I discovered shadow work, the missing piece that all my astrological knowledge had been pointing toward but never quite reaching. Shadow work demanded that I face the ways my Leo rising had been running my life from the unconscious. The grandiosity, the need to be special, the way I'd use my intelligence and creativity as weapons of separation rather than tools of connection, all of it had to be acknowledged, felt, and consciously integrated. I began to see how my Leo rising's healthy expression had been there all along, buried beneath layers of trauma and conditioning. The genuine warmth, the natural leadership, the ability to inspire and to teach, these weren't performances but authentic expressions of my solar nature. The key was learning to serve the light rather than demanding that the light serve me. As I write this now, I'm finally beginning to embody what Hafez meant when he wrote, "Carry your heart through this world like a life-giving sun." My Leo rising is learning to shine, not for applause, but for the pure joy of illumination, not to be seen, but to help me truly see and feel others, not to be special, but to help hold space for the specialness of us all. The Leo archetype, when integrated through conscious shadow work, becomes a beacon of authentic self-expression, creative courage, and generous love. It's the difference between being a black hole that consumes all light and attention and being a star that generates its own light while nurturing the growth of everything in its orbit. This is the Leo path, from the wounded king demanding worship to the wise sovereign whose very presence reminds others of their own royal nature. From the performer desperate for validation to the artist who creates from love rather than desperation. From the ego that burns bridges to the heart that builds them. In the end, we are all learning to carry our hearts through this world like life-giving suns. The Leo rising journey simply makes this lesson impossible to ignore.